The Dom Songbird. A Billionaire Romance. Island of Love Series Book 6. By Michelle Love.
Chapter 1. Gwen.
It was the sweet lull after the lunch rush had died down, and the dinner rush hadn't yet begun. We were supposed to be rolling up more silverware for the tables, but instead, Andrea, Carly and I were taking a little break in the tiny courtyard outside of the restaurant. Carly was hiding a cigarette in her hand, Andrea was fighting with her mom on Facebook, and I was just trying to recover from the press of people from lunch. "You look like hell, hun," Carly said, glancing at me. "Did you stay up all night again?" I grinned ruefully. "Not all night." Andrea looked up from her phone to frown at me. "I would feel better about that if you were actually staying up for something fun. Was it more music?" I made a face, and Carly chuckled. "That song about the girl and the bird and the man again?" I sighed, which was as good as saying yes. "It's coming along. I just want it to be perfect, and it's not." Andrea snorted. "No such thing as perfect in this world. Not when there are bills to pay. Get it good enough and move on." I knew that Andrea was right. People didn't make a living off of perfect songs. They wrote a lot of songs, refined their skills, sang their heads off whenever they could, and over time, if they were lucky, if they were clever and quick enough, they might make it. I wasn't built that way, however. I wanted this song to be perfect, and despite all the evidence to the contrary, I thought maybe I could get it there. Maybe if I just put in enough work, enough time, enough long nights. Carly interrupted my thoughts with a gentle elbow in my ribs and a nod towards the atrium. Across from the restaurant in the courtyard was the hotel lobby, where we could see jet-setters from all over the world checking in. The sunny Florida beaches brought all sorts of people to the Fox Hotel, Resort and Suites, but I could tell who Carly was pointing at right away. "Well, look at that," said Andrea, impressed. The man walking into the hotel was handsome, but then it was a high-end luxury resort. We saw handsome people every day. This man was different. He was in his late 30s or early 40s, with a lean body that was only emphasized by his well-cut linen suit. His dark hair was a stark contrast to the pale suit, sleeked back in a fashionable cut, and when he smiled, his white teeth flashed. For just a moment I was convinced that he had seen us, or rather, seen me. Our eyes locked, and in the back of my mind, I noted that his eyes seemed as dark as his hair, almost sinister. Then he half-turned to greet a gorgeous redhead in an emerald designer dress, one that looked like it would cost a year of my salary, bare minimum, and to offer his arm and a quick kiss. I stifled a sigh. Of course, it was ridiculous that he had even noticed me for a moment. Whoever he was, he didn't keep company with a cheap little waitress. The three of us watched as he crossed the lobby and was greeted by a dark-haired woman who looked fresh out of the pool, clad in a long and flowing robe. My eyebrows shot up to my hairline as I saw him offer her a kiss. "Oh, come on," I muttered. The man, a gorgeous woman on either arm, merely nodded at the concierge and swept towards the elevators to the penthouse suites. "Well, that was like being visited by royalty," Carly said, shaking her head, and at my confused look she added, "That was Donovan Fox." The owner of the hotel? That was an admitted surprise. I had been working at the hotel for almost 2 years, and had never given its owner much thought. I was too, making ends meet. If it did ever cross my mind, I just assumed he was a stuffy older man with a golf habit. The man we had just seen in the lobby might have been a golfer, but that certainly wasn't the game he had in mind just now. Andrea laughed at the slight blush on my cheeks. "Ah, does baby girl not know that she's working for a damned Casanova?" she cooed. "That man gets more tail than all the Kennedys combined." "Stop it, you're embarrassing her," Carly chided. "I'm surprised that you've never seen him around here before, Gwen. He shows up, usually with a beautiful woman or two on his arm, checks to make sure things are going well, and then moves on after a few weeks. He gets treated like a king, but he does tip well." "That's good, I guess," I said dubiously, and Andrea threw an arm over my shoulders. Do you want to get in good with Donovan Fox, sweetie? Maybe if you sing him a pretty song, he'll make you famous, huh? Oh gosh, no. I pushed her away. Like the man would give a damn about my voice. Andrea smirked. Fair enough. His physical appetites are legendary. So maybe your throat instead. I bet he could make you sing. Hey, we need another 80 silverware rolls before dinner. Gus yelled from inside. All three of us made a face at our boss's summons, and we got up to file back into the restaurant. As I went back to work, I found myself thinking again about Donovan Fox. The phrase handsome as the devil drifted across my mind, and the shiver that ran down my spine startled me. My mind drifted to what he was very likely doing with the two gorgeous women right now, and then I forced myself to go back to the task at hand. I had absolutely no business with Donovan Fox. He didn't know me, he never would. End of story. Gus, I don't do room service, I'm a waitress. I protested, but the restaurant manager was obviously not listening. And I'm not a cook, but here I am, he growled, finishing off the plates he was prepping. He might not have been a cook, but it looked good to me, sausage and eggs and toast with a small bowl of carefully cut fruit. The silver cover clanged down over all of it, and I jumped a little. This isn't my job, I repeated, and Gus shook his head. This is a special case. Just get the food up to the penthouse and that's it. The house staff got hit by the flu and there's no one else. Go upstairs, hand off the tray and come back. Not difficult, so drop the tantrum already. I scowled but took the tray from him and stalked out. If I were honest, I was sort of scared of room service. I had heard way too many stories of girls who got harassed by terrible male guests, and that didn't even cover some of the weird things room service workers saw. Sometime last year, a room service worker had gotten bitten by an actual pet cheetah that some guest had smuggled in. I could deal with the crowds in the restaurant, but something about possibly being trapped in a room with an unpleasant guest gave me the creeps. Just this once won't hurt, I told myself. Get in, get out, and you're done. That's all. The order slip told me that I was delivering to a penthouse, and despite my anxiety, I enjoyed the swift ride to the top in the elegant wood-paneled elevator. One full side was hazy glass, letting me look out over the sea close by. The doors whooshed open at the top, and there were two women waiting for the elevator as I got off of it. They were chatting companionably, well-dressed and obviously freshly showered, and I wouldn't have given it a second thought if I hadn't recognized them. They were the redhead and the brunette from the day before, and they paid me not a single bit of attention as the elevator door closed behind me. I swallowed hard. All right. I hadn't expected to deliver breakfast to the owner of the hotel this morning, but this didn't have to be weird. Go in, drop off, get out, and get back to my comfort zone downstairs. There was only one door at the end of the short hallway, and summoning up my nerves, I knocked on it. Come in, came a rough voice, and telling myself that I would be quick, I let myself in.
Chapter 2. Donovan.
I couldn't help breathing a slight sigh of relief when Lyle and Anna kissed me goodbye. Did we wear you out? Anna teased, and I grinned. Of course you did, I lied. You need to give me some time to gather up my strength again. Lyle pouted a little, kissing my other cheek. Don't take too long, she ordered. My shoot is only going to keep me in Florida for another day. I smiled because, as lovely as she was, as they both were, I didn't have any real interest in seeing either of them again. I ushered them both to the door, and then feeling slightly at a loss, sat at the breakfast table at the window. I should have felt at the top of the world. Hell, it certainly looked that way when I looked out the window. The penthouse rose 20 stories above the beach, and the blue waters of the Gulf stretched out before me. I had taken over the hotel properties when I was in my 20s, and I had grown them to a world-spanning enterprise that catered to the rich and the powerful. I should have been proud of that, and I was, but right now all I felt was bored. Bored with the hotels, bored with the beautiful women I had just spent a good night with, bored with it all. A hesitant knock on the door made me look up, frowning reflexively from the window. I only dimly remembered ordering room service, though the food had been more for the women than for myself. "Come in." The door opened, and at first I saw the silver tray cover. The girl holding it wasn't tall, and she made herself look shorter still by keeping her head ducked down and her shoulders hitched up. "Where would you like me to put this, sir?" she asked softly, and there was something about her voice that made me turn around to look at her more closely. There was a rich, controlled quality to it that seemed out of place somehow on her slight frame. "Over here on the breakfast table, please." She crossed the room to where I waited at the table, never meeting my eyes, and her gaze skittered over my form, taking in the loose linen pants that were the only garment I wore. I smiled a little when she lingered over my bare chest and shoulders. She was dressed in the waitstaff's demure olive green sarong top and skirt, but it was hard to imagine her dealing with a sudden rush of guests at dinner time. She set the tray down gently and pulled off the cover. I didn't look at the food. Instead, I looked at her, examining her with a sudden curiosity. Is there anything else you need?" she asked, swallowing a little, and I smiled. "Are you afraid of me?" Whatever she had been expecting to hear, it wasn't that. Her eyes flew up to meet mine, and for the first time I could clearly see her face. She had a delicate kind of beauty with full lips and a faint and natural blush to her cheeks. Her eyes were an almost shockingly bright blue, fringed with long lashes, and it was too easy to imagine those eyes widening with sudden arousal or fluttering closed when she was kissed. "What kind of question is that?" she exclaimed, holding up the tray cover as if it were some kind of shield. "An honest one," I answered, lounging back in my chair. "You stepped in here as if it was the wolf's lair, and you were expecting to get eaten alive." "I work in the restaurant," she hedged, looking away, "and we really aren't meant to be doing room service." "Is room service work really so awful?" I asked curiously, and she flushed. "Well, you hear things. Bad guests. Every now and then a girl gets trapped in a room. That one girl got bitten by a cheetah." I blinked because whatever she was going to say, I really wasn't expecting that. "What? A cheetah? Girls getting trapped?" She lifted one slender shoulder in a shrug. "There's a reason I'm nervous. Room service is sort of risky." I scowled, because I certainly hadn't heard anything of the sort. "Well, thank you for telling me about that. I'm sorry, it's a terror. And I assure you that I don't bite." Even as I spoke, my mind wandered to how very supple her soft skin looked. Eminently biteable, frankly. She must have heard something in my voice that alarmed her, because she looked suddenly worried. "It's not as bad as all that. Please, I really like my job." I rolled my eyes at how terrified she looked suddenly. "Stop that, I'm not going to fire you for telling me the damn truth," I said, and she nodded, still looking unconvinced. I sighed, glancing at her name tag. "Gwen, right? Gwen, I need to know when things like that are happening so I can make sure that they stop. I'm glad you told me." She nodded, unconvinced. It was probably the best I could do, and the most merciful thing would be to send her back to the kitchen. For some reason, I didn't want to do that, however. Instead, I slouched back in my chair, looking her over. Slender and small, she wasn't my usual type. I generally preferred my women to be curvy. Still, there was something about her that drew my attention, which made me want to reach out and see if I could wipe that scared look out of her eyes. "Do you work here full-time, Gwen?" "I do, sir." "Call me Donovan," I commanded. "When I want you to call me sir, I'll let you know." The blush that seemed permanent on her cheeks deepened even further, and something in me roused. I wondered for a moment what it would be like to have her calling me sir, waiting for my next order, and looking at me with pleasure in her eyes instead of fear. "Donovan," she said as if she were trying the name out in her mouth, and there was that strange husky quality in her voice again. "You may work full-time here, but that's not what you want to do, is it?" I asked, my voice soft. "What is it you want to do, Gwen?" She swallowed, and I couldn't help standing up and getting close to her. She smelled like apple shampoo and salt. I wondered if she'd swum in the sea in the morning. "I want to sing," she said, and I chuckled. "Like a siren, bringing men to their doom on the rocks." "I'm not a siren," she said quietly. "I always think more of birds, who sing for the joy of it. A songbird and not a siren. That suits you, I think." She started to say something, but she gasped as I brought my hand up to cup her cheek. Her wide eyes got even wider, and I somehow couldn't stand staying away any longer. Cupping one hand at the small of her back and pulling her closer to me, I leaned down to kiss her. I did it slowly, giving her the chance to escape if she so chose. But she didn't. The first touch of our lips was electric, and I knew that she felt it too. She went from being stiff and nervous to melting against me, one small hand coming up to rest against my chest. She was soft and sweet under the kiss. "Perfect little songbird, I could make you sing," I murmured and pulled her closer to me. She tasted like pure heaven, and I felt as if I could have kissed her forever. Then a brisk chime broke through the sensual haze, my phone going off, and with a gasp Gwen drew back, a wine-like redness to her lips. She looked startled and wary and needy all at once, and if she hadn't stumbled back towards the door, I would have ignored the phone and started to kiss her again. I should go back to the restaurant," she stuttered. "You should get that." I toyed with the idea of telling her to stay right where she was, but realized that might be pushing her too hard, too fast. So I nodded, atypically going against my desires and instincts. "The restaurant lets you customize your outfit somewhat," I said, pointing at her drab uniform. "Put some color into that. Dull and plain doesn't suit you, little songbird." I turned away, listening to her breath stutter. Then her light steps receded, the door clicked open, then closed, and she was gone, leaving me to deal with a morning of reviews and meetings. But something about her lingered, and I determined right there and then that I would be seeing Gwen again.
Chapter 3. Gwen.
When I stumbled down from the penthouse, I told myself that I wouldn't think about Donovan anymore. I wouldn't think about how I'd felt when he touched me, how he had kissed me in a way that made my knees weak, what I might have done with him if that phone hadn't rung. I knew that Carly would say it was one more creep guest doing what he wanted, while Andrea would speculate on whether I could get money or jewelry out of it. So I didn't tell either of them what had happened in the penthouse with Donovan Fox, but it wasn't just because I didn't want to hear what they had to say. There was also a part of me that, for some strange reason, wanted to keep the incident to myself. It wasn't just because it was private, and it wasn't because I was ashamed. The kiss had been demanding but not forced upon me. If I hadn't wanted it, I sensed that he would have stopped. Donovan Fox didn't strike me as a man who was interested in women who didn't find him appealing. Instead, there had been something about that encounter that had left a strange glow in me, a flickering flame that I could only keep lit if I protected it. It warmed me as I went about my busy day, even though I knew Mr. Fox, Donovan, would leave, and that kiss would be likely the one and only thing we ever shared. It was enough for me. A few days later, as I was waiting for the bus that would take me from my apartment complex to the hotel, an older man wheeled a cart of flowers down the street. They were bright, splashy blooms, pinks and purples and blues, and on impulse I stopped him. He smiled when I shyly took a violet-blue bloom and tucked it behind my ear before paying for it. "Very pretty," he told me, and I smiled. When I got to the hotel, everyone was buzzing about the changes in room service and hospitality. Some of the management had been fired, and now there was a rule that room service was always going to be 2 people doing runs, never 1. I flashed back to the conversation I had had with Donovan. Had he confronted management with a cheetah story? Maybe my random encounter with Donovan had done some good after all. I mostly managed to avoid thinking of him. Several waiters had come down with the flu that the house staff had spread, so I was too busy to do more than tend to customers, especially when there was an unexpected rush after a furiously powerful squall hit the beach. Heading into the dining room with more menus and a bright smile, to compensate for customers who were irate at having their beach day truncated. I froze when I saw the man who had also come in with the rain. Donovan lounged alone at a table, a sprinkle of water darkening his pale blue silk shirt. He gazed at me as I approached him. It was my job, after all. Nevertheless, it felt like I was somehow being pulled into his trajectory as his dark eyes watched me. "You took my advice," he observed when I arrived at his table, and my hand came up to touch the flower nervously. "Andrea and Carly said that it was cute," I said shyly. I was afraid it made me look like a 12-year-old. "Andrea and Carly are right, and no, you look nothing at all like a child." His eyes roamed up and down my figure as if we were perfectly alone, and I clutched the menus a little closer, swallowing hard. "I should tell you about the specials," I said softly, and he nodded, a slightly amused smile on his face. "You should," he said, and I felt as if a spell had been broken. After he ordered, I scuttled back to the kitchen. All I could think of were the two women who had been leaving his room when we'd first met, how glamorous and beautiful they had been. It sent a strange pang of envy through me, and a self-pity that I shook off with a hard scowl. What the heck was I even thinking? Marshalling my mood, I moved through the dining room, taking other orders, commiserating with unhappy beachgoers, and bringing out the food as fast as the overwhelmed kitchen staff could come up with it. I didn't have time to dawdle, and Donovan's courtesy surprised me. After our initial interaction, he didn't try to distract me further. I brought him his meal, he thanked me, and I hurried away, still feeling his eyes on me. I didn't even realize what he had done until it was time to cash out. Chewy's eyes widened when he was totaling up my tips, and then I gasped when he handed me what must have been more than $300, more than half from Donovan, and I swallowed hard. Everyone in the hotel talked about how generous he was, but I had the feeling that there was something more to this. A mixture of excitement and worry filled me. A man so wealthy could easily have implied he was buying me, were it not for his impeccable manners thus far. Even the kiss, he'd given me ample space to decide whether I wanted it. And I had. So very badly. Just as I was headed for my locker, Gus stopped me. "Delivery to the penthouse," he said, pointing at a cart, and I frowned. "Aren't we supposed to be going in pairs now?" "That's for official room service, and you aren't. Quick run in and out, and then you can head home." I wasn't surprised at all when I saw on the order ticket that it was Donovan's penthouse suite, and as I went up the elevator, I felt a dozen butterflies in my stomach. I took a deep breath, and at his crisp "come in," I ventured into the room warily. "Is your last name really Love?" he asked as soon as I entered his apartment. He was sprawled on the leather couch in the sunken living room, his shirt unbuttoned halfway down his muscled chest, watching me with hungry curiosity that made me think less of cheetahs than it did a lion lying in wait. "It is," I said, proud of the fact that my voice didn't shake at all. "Believe me, I've heard all of the jokes, so unless you think you have a new one." The answer popped out of my mouth before I could stop it, and I swallowed a startled groan. Since when did I run my mouth with anybody, much less the man who paid my salary? But instead of being irritated, Donovan laughed. "No, all of the ones that I could think of were terrible, so I let it go." "You wear it well?" "The flower?" "No, the name." "It suits you." "If you say so," I said dubiously. "Where would you like the food?" "On the coffee table is fine." "Are you hungry?" I shook my head as I set down his tray of cheese, fruit, and sliced sausage. Then my stomach rumbled, and Donovan laughed. "Liar. Your shift is over. Come sit here with me and have some of this." I hadn't eaten since noon, but refusing him anything wasn't something I thought would be easy. That's really not something we're meant to do with a guest. Wordlessly, Donovan passed me a slice of pale cheese on a dark cracker, and I sank down on the far end of the couch, crunching into it gratefully when Donovan spoke again, his eyes trailing over me lazily. "Do you have a boyfriend, Gwen?" I bit my tongue sharply, just barely managed to avoid spitting out the cracker, and stared at him. "What kind of question is that?" Donovan chuckled. "An honest one that deserves an honest answer, I think." I wasn't so sure about that. Well, no, I don't have a boyfriend. Why do you want to know? For a moment, he just looked at me as if wondering what planet I came from. Are you serious? He asked. You have no idea why a man might ask an attractive woman if she's seeing anyone. None at all. I'm not an attractive woman, I said bluntly, and I saw the 2 women who left this penthouse a few days ago. So yeah, I guess I don't have a clue. He grinned a little at my tone, and I scowled at him. I was beginning to be less worried about losing my job if I said the wrong thing, and more frustrated with Donovan for thinking he got to ask whatever questions he wanted. You're wrong, Donovan offered. I think you're quite attractive, and if that kiss we shared the last time you were here is any indication, you think the same about me. And while you didn't seem to be the sort to kiss when you had a boyfriend at home, I wasn't sure. I gritted my teeth and reached for another slice of cheese. If I had to deal with him thinking I was some kind of cheater, I could damn well be fed for the privilege. That's flattering, I muttered, and he laughed again. I had to admit I enjoyed the low, husky sound. Well, a lot of the women that I deal with don't really mind stepping out on their partners that much. Then you need to hang out with different women, I retorted. You're probably not wrong. So far, it seems to be going pretty well for me. What about for you? He teased. The food is good, I admitted grudgingly. What about the kiss? Once again, I nearly choked on a cracker. It was nice, I mumbled. Oh, Songbird, he murmured, shaking his head. You're lying to me again. I think we both know it was a whole lot more than that. I dodged that line of conversation. I heard what you did for room service. Thank you. Donovan nodded, a faint shadow stealing over his face. That was a bad business that should have been stopped long before now. I noticed that it doesn't apply to waitstaff though, I said, and there was a sudden gleam in his eyes, one that made my heart beat a little faster. Well, waitstaff shouldn't be making runs to guests' rooms at all. And yet here I am. Yes. He leaned in, eyes locked on mine. I could have stopped him. I could have stood up and told him I was done, and that I was going home. No matter what caution told me, there was a voice at the back of my head that said he wouldn't fire me for it. I didn't. Instead, I leaned into the hand that came up to cradle the side of my face, and when he kissed me, I parted my lips for him. The last kiss had been fast, like a lion pouncing on its prey. This one. I felt seduced, as if somehow the lion, with its golden beauty and its basso profundo rumble, had convinced me it was tame. I felt a thrilling shock of electricity run through me as he kissed me, and I leaned in, wanting more. I had kissed men before, of course, boyfriends, dares, that sort of thing. The difference between kissing them and kissing Donovan was as wide as the ocean. I could feel the teeth in his kiss, and it left my mouth feeling sensuously tender and soft. He wasn't content kissing my mouth, however, and I gasped a little as he tilted my head to one side, nuzzling against my jaw before dropping a line of kisses along my throat. I can't, I found myself whispering. I can't. He paused and pulled back long enough to look at me. Donovan, on his own, was handsome enough, but Donovan's aroused, with that gleaming light in his eyes and his mouth reddened from our kiss, was utterly devastating. Why? He asked reasonably, and his tone was so kind that I couldn't help throwing my arms around him and pressing my face to his chest. After a startled moment, he wrapped me in his arms. Did someone hurt you before? He asked, a silky thread of menace in his voice. It took me a moment before I realized what he was asking. What? No. No, not at all. It's just. I'm not this type of girl, I said weakly. There was a heat centered low in my belly and an electric tingle that danced over my skin that demurred, but I shook my head. What kind of girl are you then? He asked, and I laughed a little. One that definitely does not belong in a penthouse kissing her boss, I said, and he made a sound that was suspiciously similar to a purr. If I'm your boss, doesn't that mean that I get to tell you what to do? Maybe I say that you belong right here. His voice dropped, and I could feel his lips moving next to my ear right before he nipped at my earlobe. I wanted to reply, but what he was doing with his mouth took my breath away, making me cling closer to him. Maybe I say that you belong next to me, Gwen. If I'm your boss and you have to do what I say, maybe you would like taking orders, he asked, and I couldn't stop from shivering. This man could take my breath away with his kisses, and when he pulled back again, there was humor in his eyes, but also something wild and needy as well. Desire ran through me like someone had suddenly undammed a river, and it nearly made me dizzy. With just his words, I could imagine him doing all of that to me with crystal clarity. It didn't shock me exactly. What shocked me was how very much I wanted him to do it. I had always thought that I was something of a cold fish when it came to romance, but apparently, what it had taken was this man and his words unraveling me like a scarf until I had come completely undone. It was too much, and with a cry I squirmed away from him and lurched to my feet. For a moment, he stared after me as if all he wanted was to drag me back. Then a rueful look came over his face. "No?" he asked, and no matter how panicked I was or shocked that I had been so open to what he was talking about, I couldn't bring myself to tell him no. I need to go," I said, the words stumbling out of my mouth. "I should go." "If you want to," he said quietly. "But really, there was another reason I asked you here." I blinked. There it was. "I looked you up online. I found some of the recordings you've made." Whatever I had been expecting, that wasn't it. I had made those recordings at home with a borrowed microphone, facing a corner of my little apartment that had been draped with blankets to improve the sound quality. I had been proud at the time, but in short order, I had seen how amateurish they were compared to what other people were producing. "You're good," he said, "and I'd like to hire you. Come sing here on Friday night. I'm meeting with some people from the hotels in the area. I think you have a good voice, and I'd like you to sing that night." I don't have anything to wear to anything so fancy," I blurted out, and then I shook my head. I've never sung in front of an audience before. First time for everything. Donovan reached into his wallet and peeled away what looked like $300, stuffing it into my hand. "There you go. Dress fee paid, and it'll be another $300 at the end of the performance. If you are taking requests, I'm partial to blue on you." "You're serious," I said slowly. "You want me to come sing for you?" "I am always serious, Songbird," he said, and though his gaze was soft, I could still see that predatory gleam there. "Friday night. Show up at 10. I'll be expecting you."
Chapter 4. Donovan.
Getting a group of independent millionaires to agree to anything was like herding cats. By the time dinner was over, I was ready to be done with it all. I had poured myself a couple of fingers of scotch when there was a shy knock on the door. Knowing who it was already, I didn't stop the smile that crossed my face as I walked over to open the door, then stopped as Gwen was revealed before me in all her soft, delicate beauty, this time enrobed in a sapphire dress. The dress fell almost to the ground, even with the tall heels she wore so nervously. I could see its weight as she walked shyly into the room, casting a nervously hopeful look at me. While the dress covered her completely from hip to ground, it was cut low enough to show off her slight curves on top, leaving her shoulders nearly bare except for a pair of slender jeweled straps. There was a pair of bright glittery rhinestone barrettes in her hair, completing the picture. She looked like some perfect mix of innocent and sultry, right down to the pink lipstick that had been applied so artfully. Whoever this Andrea was, she probably deserved a raise. "Is it all right?" Gwen asked softly, and I reached out to stroke her cheek. "You look stunning." "I wanted to look nice. For your guests. For you. I wouldn't want to embarrass you in any way." I laughed softly, leaning down to brush her full lips with my own, deliberately keeping the touch light, or I knew we'd never leave the apartment. "You could never embarrass me." "You've never heard me sing live," she whispered into the kiss, and I shrugged as I forced myself to step away. "You seem like a good bet." It looked like she wanted to say something else, but she shook her head. "Where do you want me?" she asked. "Should I be singing something soft when people come in, or—" I was suddenly tempted to see if I could make her stand on the table. That vision appealed to me, seeing her up for display, the beauty that was so easy to overlook in normal life shining like a Christmas tree. Would she like it? Would she be terrified? How easy it would be then to run my hand up her slender calf, making her shiver before moving it higher. "Why don't you get to go stand over there?" I said instead. "With your back to the window. I think that would be striking." She moved obediently, only giving me a curious glance when I reclined on the couch not so far away. "Should I start with something soft?" I suggested. "Give yourself time to work up to something impressive." She smiled at me and nodded. I watched, fascinated, as her eyes fluttered closed, and she seemed to compose herself. Then Gwen started to sing, and a chill ran up my spine. Her voice was lower than I would have thought, and there was something perfect and true about it. She pulled the notes effortlessly out of the air, and when she sang about a love that would never die, and the abandonment of a partner, I could feel something in me that felt as if it had been asleep all my life stir. She believes it, I realized. Her skill was impressive, her natural talent even more so, and as she stood with her back to the wide dark gulf, I could feel the heartbreak of the song running through her as well. Gosh, what must a full performance be like if she felt the sweetness and the sorrow of her own songs every night? I listened, rapt, as the song finished, and then another one started. This one was just as soft, but there was a kind of joy to it. Her eyes opened blue as the summer sea, and I drew my breath as she started singing to me, or so it felt. When she talked about how good it felt to love and be loved, I smiled, and I could find no shade of sorrow in her at all. As the song ended, her eyes slowly lost some of their happiness, and I felt a brief kick of regret for being my usual self. "There's no one coming, is there?" she said quietly. I shook my head. My meeting was earlier, at a very forgettable restaurant. It would have been much more entertaining if you had actually been there, singing for me. A number of emotions chased each other over her face: anger, frustration, sorrow, a kind of wild speculation, and then she hid them away again, her face pale and neutral in a way that made me ache. "Then what did you hire me for?" "Because I can't look away from you. I hired you to sing for me." "Is that all?" she asked with such nervousness that I laughed slightly. "Beautiful little Songbird, believe me when I say that I don't need to buy my company." Gwen's eyes narrowed, and I was relieved to see some life in them again. I was excited about my first live performance, Donovan. I practiced for days. I thought you really believed I was good enough to. "Stop," I warned, getting to my feet but not approaching her. "I lied only because I was uninterested in sharing you with anyone. Not because you're not talented, Gwen. You are exceedingly. I could tell from the videos, and just now, you've blown me away." There was still a hint of hurt in her eyes that I was suddenly desperate to erase. "Sing for me again," I urged. "Not because I'm buying you, Gwen, but because I want to stand here and listen to you. I need to." If she'd refused me, I don't know what I would have done, but then she took a slow breath and began once more. I lost myself in her voice. In her. In the way she didn't spare herself when she performed. When she felt an emotion from a song, she wore it as beautifully as the sapphire dress, turning from sweetness to joy to grief and back again. Her whole being seemed to vibrate as her powerful voice grew stronger with each song, filling the apartment. Filling me. Finally she stopped and reached for a glass of water I had placed within her reach. There was a spark of defiance in her beautiful eyes. "Well," she asked, "is that what you wanted?" "No," I admitted, though in other circumstances I would have wanted to hear her sing until the world ended. "Your singing belongs on the world stage, but that's not all I want from you." I watched her to see if she would gather herself up and walk out. Instead, she wavered, glancing at the door, glancing at me. Her obvious uncertainty moved me in ways very little ever did. "Come here," I said softly, and was relieved when she slowly crossed the floor to stand in front of me. I looked her up and down, something that brought that lovely color to her cheeks again, and smiled down into her eyes. "There is absolutely no flaw in you," I told her. "I could stand here forever and listen. I could stand here forever and look. I'm not." "No." My sharp command visibly startled her to stillness. "You're not going to contradict me on something I know to be true. There are consequences for that." She licked her lips, and I managed to hold myself back. "Soon." "And what are those consequences?" she asked, her voice soft and husky. Did she even know how beautiful she looked? "Whatever I think suits the crime," I said easily. "Maybe a spanking. Maybe I'll take that dress right off of you." She shuddered, and at first I thought she was thinking of having all of her delectable charms exposed, but then she looked at me, her blue eyes wide and wanting. "Don't make me leave," she said, her voice aching, and any resolve that I had to draw this out shattered. I took her hand and dragged her into me, kissing her roughly. She whimpered a little when my teeth pressed against her soft lip, but still clung to me with all of her strength. "I want you," I told her between kisses. "I've wanted you ever since the first time I saw you. If you want to leave, do it now, because otherwise, I'm not letting you out of bed until morning." She didn't pause at all. Instead, Gwen pressed herself even closer to me, her kisses shy but hungry. "Please," she said, and as I pulled her close to me, I wondered if I was ever going to be able to let her go.
Chapter 5. Gwen.
I knew that there were words for singers who slept with their clients. None of them were kind, and all of them could end a career before it even got off the ground. However, all that mattered to me right now was Donovan's mouth on mine. When he stood, cradling me against his chest, I gasped at the shift of his powerful muscles banded around my body. "You feel perfect in my arms," Donovan murmured. "Exactly as I've imagined, and I've been imagining a lot, Gwen." I blushed, and he kissed me hard as he carried me to the bedroom. It was dominated by a king-sized bed that seemed to stretch from wall to wall, and when he laid me down on it, I sighed in surprise. It was pure luxury lying on the bed and watching him move around the edges of it. "Your breath caught when I talked about making you walk outside with no clothes," he said almost casually, and I gulped. "That would be embarrassing, wouldn't it?" I asked, and he gave me an amused look. "Is that all it would be?" "No," I admitted, and Donovan laughed. "I think we are going to have a fine time together tonight," he said, reaching for my hand. I gave it to him without thinking, and then blinked when he tied a silk tie around my wrist. "Donovan." "Do you trust me?" he asked. I sighed, because he was stroking the skin of my palm with a gentle finger. "Yes. I think." "Good. Everything we do tonight is all to make you feel good, all right? If you don't like anything, speak up, but I think you will." He waited until I nodded, to lash the other end of the tie to the headboard. My other hand received the same treatment, and in a matter of seconds I was in the mattress, my arms stretched up over my head. Donovan stopped to look at me for a moment. "Perfect. Just perfect." I opened my mouth to tell him that he was obviously mistaken, but a predatory look in his eyes made me shut my mouth. I wondered if he would really make good on his threat to make me walk out the door without my dress on, but I realized that even if he wouldn't do that, he would absolutely give me a spanking. "Good girl." "Gosh, so very beautiful," he purred. "So very perfect." This time, I couldn't muster a reply because his weight over me, his mouth on me, was all too much. It just all felt so good, and I wanted to get my hands all over him, but I couldn't. "I've thought about you like this, all perfectly open for me," Donovan muttered. "I'm going to make you feel so good, Songbird." "So perfect," Donovan muttered, and maybe I should have been embarrassed about how intimately he was speaking, but instead, I felt a strange pride in how much he wanted me. I had never been looked as so thoroughly by a man before. Donovan handled me as if I were something sacred and precious. Another time, I'll lay you down and make you spell out exactly what it is you want me to do. I won't care if it takes all day. I'll make you say it. But not today.
Chapter 6. Donovan.
I kept my promise to Gwen. We explored each other thoroughly that night, and we both fell asleep sometime, not long before dawn. When I woke up, sunlight was streaming in through the window, warm and sweet, and I realized something odd. I had a good time with women, and I like to think that they had a good time with me. That good time was usually something with an expiration date, however. We enjoyed each other's company, and then we left one another in the morning, moving on with our respective lives. As I glanced at Gwen sleeping curled on her side with a spray of golden hair on her face, I realized I didn't want her to leave. I hadn't had a woman in my bed like her in a long while, one who wanted me to lead and then rewarded me with a pure and gorgeously perfect response. That was what I told myself. Somewhere deep inside me, however, I knew that it was far more than that. I had never before had anyone like Gwen at all, never run into her passion, her delicate sweetness, her intoxicating combination of innocence and sensuality. I didn't want to lose it yet. In the dining room I made a few calls, and by the time that was done, I could hear her stirring in the bedroom. I got back to her, just in time to see her examining the dress that I had torn off of her. I need to figure out what I'm going to wear when I get home. That's nothing to worry about, I said with a shrug, although the thought of her leaving made me suddenly tense. For now, just put on one of my shirts. Food will be here in a few minutes. Despite her worry about her clothes, Gwen brightened at the mention of food, and I was glad that I had told room service to bring up a little of everything. Go shower, I told her. Food will be here when you're done. While the water was running, I thought about what it would be like to come in after her, to step behind her in all of that hot, steaming water. Would she let me wash her? She came out dressed in one of my dress shirts, and not ravaging her right then and there took almost all the restraint I had left in me. We were quiet dining companions at first, but apparently food was what it took to loosen her tongue. This all looks so good, and I don't even recognize half of the fruit here. What's that one? Dragon fruit, I said with a smile. Try it, it's nice and sweet. Whenever she tasted something new, she insisted I try it as well, and though I laughed, I could feel something inside me coming unmoored, untethered. I loved indulging my partners in bed, but that was usually as far as it went. In its own way, sharing food with Gwen, letting her feed me what was on her plate, was almost as intimate as what we had done the night before. All too soon, though, breakfast was over, and Gwen sighed. I guess I need to start thinking about how to get home, she said. I'm off for the weekend, but I know you're busy. Before I could say anything, there was another knock on the door. Gwen froze, unsure of what to do, but I smiled at her. Don't worry. I'm expecting them. Stay right there. I came back with a double armful of bags, setting them on the couch. Here, these are for you. She blinked, walking over to look through the bags in shock. I saw her face register delight and confusion, and finally she turned to me. There must be at least $1,000 worth of clothing in here. I didn't know what you wanted or liked, so I asked my personal shopper to make some decisions. But how did you? I held up the tag that I had cut off of her ruined gown. It had her size on it, but Gwen still looked confused. This is too much, she said, and I grinned. Not if you're coming to Atlanta with me. She looked at me as if I had gone insane, and I laughed again. There was something about surprising her that delighted me. What's in Atlanta? Some kind of museum opening. It's marked on my calendar as something I should absolutely not miss, and I wouldn't mind having a pretty date on my arm. If you say yes, I can make arrangements for suitable attire there, but these clothes should be perfect for seeing the town. Well, they're perfect if there were 5 of me, she said absently, and then Gwen raised those extraordinary blue eyes to me. What is this? She asked softly. I frowned. What do you mean? Well, we had an unforgettable night, one that, well, unforgettable and amazing. But now you're buying me clothing and taking me away for the weekend. Is that not what people do when they like each other? I asked, but I thought I saw where she was going. It's the kind of thing that people do when their relationship is a little more transactional than I would prefer. I know that you said you don't pay your women. This isn't a payment, I said. I could feel the tension in my voice, and she winced a little. It feels a little like one, she said, lifting her hands helplessly. You must know that there is no way that I can give you anything half so impressive. You want to give me presents? I asked in surprise, and she gave me a strangely uncomfortable look, one that was mingled disbelief and perhaps even pity. It made my hackles rise even as it made something in me, something I didn't want to look at, prowl a little closer. Of course I do, she said. There was that red blush on her cheeks again, but she forged forward. We shared something I thought was very special. Maybe you don't think it is. Maybe I'm just making a fool of myself. But yes, I do want to give you something nice. She looked as if she was on the verge of tears, and that overrode everything else that was making me so cautious. I crossed the space between us with just a few strides, coming to take her in my arms. She smelled like my shampoo and my laundry detergent, but underneath that was her own smell, something lovely and sweet, almost like honey and milk. Stop worrying about this right now, I said softly. There is nothing transactional about this at all. I want you with me. I want you to be happy when you are, and that involves buying you some clothes, maybe taking you to a party, and having some fun. This isn't some kind of dark arrangement where I expect you to do exactly as I say, for some damn clothes, Gwen. She sighed, pressing her face against my chest. Promise? She asked, and the slight tremor in her voice could have ripped my cold black heart to shreds. What was it about this beautiful young woman? I do. And will you let me buy you a gift in Atlanta? I had everything that I ever wanted, and if I didn't, then I could probably have it delivered to me within 24 hours. But the look in her eyes, and the fact that no one who didn't have a financial stake had ever offered me gifts combined in my mind, as I murmured, yes.
Chapter 7. Gwen.
Atlanta had a graceful and almost melancholic elegance to it. Where I was from in Florida, everything was new and oftentimes ugly as well. Atlanta seemed to hang on to whatever beauty it could lay its hands on, no matter how old. When I mentioned this to Donovan, he smiled a little. I've always liked Atlanta for precisely that reason, he said. Florida might be more fun, but Georgia has deep, deep roots. He had flown us into a private airstrip, my first experience with a private jet, and when we touched down in Georgia, there was a sleek dark car waiting for us. Are we staying at another hotel? I asked, and he smiled. I thought about it, but I have some property here I think you might like. The small house on the very outskirts of Atlanta's most fashionable neighborhood was gorgeous, surrounded by a tall fence covered with creeping myrtle, and though it had all the modern accoutrements, it was clear that the form of it had stood the test of time. Good bones, Donovan said as I looked around at all the polished wood and glass. I bought this house years ago, when I was thinking about doing more business in Atlanta. I don't know if I've stayed more than a total of a month or so in it though. If I owned this place, I don't know if I would ever leave, I murmured, looking out the back window into the lush garden in the back. Well, let's see if you still think that when you see my place in LA, Donovan said with a laugh. He talked about the future a few times on the plane, and talked about taking me traveling to see what other beautiful cities he had business in. It made me feel warm inside, but there was still that wariness at the heart of it, the question of what we were to each other and what this could all mean. Your dress is upstairs in the master bedroom, he said with a smile. You should go see if it suits you. Donovan followed me as I went up the stairs, and when I saw the dress that had been laid out for me on the enormous bed, I gasped a little. It was a long gown in cream satin with black highlights. I could tell at a glance that it would fit me well, but there was something almost painfully sharp, painfully expensive about it. I can't, I said, turning to Donovan. It's too much. He stepped up to me, cupping the back of my neck and leaning down to kiss me. Of course it isn't. You need to look good for my friends, don't you? I did, and moreover, I knew that nothing that I could afford on my own would fit the bill. I felt as if I should protest the Cinderella treatment, but it was all too easy, far too easy to let Donovan kiss me, hold me, lavish me with things that delighted him and me. It occurred to me as he showered and I got dressed that he might not know how else to show he liked someone. He wanted to give me gifts, get me things that I couldn't have on my own, and my pleasure in them was his pleasure as well. I wondered with a pang if he had ever experienced another kind of affection. While we toured Atlanta during the day, I'd looked for something to give to him. Everything I could find was too cheap, too silly, too tacky. With everything that I picked up, I was frustrated, because if he wanted it, he could have picked it up before now. Still though, I had an idea at the back of my mind and I thought it would work. I was jotting down a few things on a scrap of paper when he emerged from the bathroom in a cloud of steam. "What's all that?" he asked, and I was taken all over again by how handsome he was, a dark towel draped low over his hips and his hair curling from the dampness. "Nothing important right now," I said. "We should hurry. If you said that the museum gala starts at 8, we should leave soon." He nodded, and with a smile pulled me into his arms for a hug. I yelped with surprise, starting to protest the rough treatment of the dress he had given me, but then the magic of his body, of the chemistry we shared between us, worked again. By the time he pulled back, I knew I would need to fix my makeup and straighten my clothes, but I still would have let him do that and more besides. "You can't go out looking like that," he said, looking at my pink cheeks and reddened lips with amusement. "You need to get decent, Songbird." I groaned and reached for my makeup again, and when he turned away to take care of his own clothing, I knew that he was smiling. The museum gala turned out to be far more impressive than Donovan had let on. The entire museum was lit up in bright lights, there was an actual red carpet, and there were local reporters held back with just a velvet rope. "Oh, I don't think I can do this," I murmured, and to my surprise, Donovan reached over to squeeze my hand. The smile on his face was far more gentle than I had ever seen it, and he raised my hand to his lips for a nearly courtly kiss. "You're going to be fine, Songbird. As a matter of fact, you're going to be amazing." I took several deep breaths and managed to exit the car without tripping or falling. Donovan offered me his arm and ushered me down the carpet. I smiled at the cameras, feeling like I was in some kind of fairy tale. "I feel like everyone is looking at me," I murmured. "Of course they are," Donovan said equally softly. "They've never seen a woman as beautiful as you." At the very least, his words had the effect of making me laugh a little. "Now I know you're joking," I told him, straightening up a little. "I don't like it when you contradict me about such things," Donovan warned, pulling me a little closer. "Come on, let's make the rounds and you'll see." I wasn't sure what Donovan meant for me to see. I was far too focused on smiling at the people he introduced me to, trying to make a good impression, trying not to embarrass Donovan and me, and barely having the energy for anything else. It was too obvious to me that these were people who I served at the Fox most of the time. They had been born to money or had married into it. Maybe they'd even earned it. But amidst the luxury and wealth in the beautiful museum hall, I felt like a disguised intruder. At least Donovan had made sure that the disguise was a good one, but I couldn't relax, couldn't let my guard down for one moment. The worst moment was when Donovan drifted off to talk with an acquaintance, and I was left to my own devices. I felt like a moving target in the hall, and decided that the wide outdoor plaza was the safest place to be. I was just breathing in the humid fresh air with relief when there was a light touch at my elbow. I jumped and turned around to see a tall and willowy brunette with sparkling dark eyes and chestnut hair swept back in a bun, offering me a glass of water. "I saw you in there. You looked a little green around the gills when you left," she said sympathetically. "Thought you could use some water." Oh, thank you, I said, taking the glass gratefully from her hand. That was very kind of you. I took a deep breath as she watched me with a slight smile on her face. You don't look like you're having a great time, she said, and I laughed a little. Oh no, it's fine, it's a wonderful event, and everyone's been so kind. She raised her eyebrow, and there was something so sympathetic about her look that I couldn't hold back a soft sigh. I guess I'm feeling a little out of my depth tonight. I don't know anyone. Well, they do say it's not what you know, it's who you know. However, I'm sure that we can fix that for you. What's your name, hun? She wasn't that much older than me, but there was something comforting, almost sisterly, about her tone. Gwen, love. She brightened a little. Oh, I know Bobby and Marie Love from Connecticut. Lovely people. Marie and I put together a charity a few years back. Are you related to them? I'm pretty sure I'm not, I said reluctantly. I wasn't quite sure how to tell this woman that most of my relatives were from small towns in Oklahoma, rather than in any of the fashionable places she often ventured to. Ah, well, it's a big family as I understand, she said with a shrug. But I am just certain that I know you from somewhere. Before I could say anything, Donovan appeared at my side, grinning easily at the woman. Ah, Jordan. Good to see you again, he said. Beautiful as ever. She offered her hand for a squeeze, and her eyes, if anything, grew brighter and softer. Well, Donovan, I was wondering when you were going to pop up. I was just chatting with Gwen here. And trying to get all of the dirt on me, I'm sure, he said with a chuckle. How've you been, Jordan? I was sorry to hear about your divorce. They talked about a few things, moving from topic to topic with the easy grace of people who had known each other for years. Donovan kept me grounded with an arm around my waist, otherwise I might have drifted back off into the warm Atlanta night. When Jordan spotted someone else she wanted to speak to, Donovan turned to me with a wry grin. Still got all your fingers and toes? What? Jordan Duplass. She's got teeth and she knows how to use them. I thought you liked her, I said in surprise. Oh, I do, but even her best friends aren't going to deny that the woman's a shark. She's been meaner since her divorce. I hope she didn't try to take a bite out of you. She was perfectly nice, I protested. I am still glad that you came over, though. Donovan's eyes softened as he looked at me, and his hand came up to cup the back of my neck. You look like you might be okay heading in for the night. I wavered. If I could do a 10-hour shift on my feet at the restaurant, there would be no reason that I couldn't finish out the evening at a party, but Donovan was right. I felt like someone who was struggling to keep my head above water, and with every moment that went past, I was sinking a little deeper. I don't want to make you miss anything. Donovan stepped a little closer, looking straight into my eyes. There was a strength and a command in his gaze that made my heart beat faster and my mouth go dry. I'm not asking you to tell me what I want or need, Donovan said softly. I'm asking you to tell me if you're done and you want to head back to the house. I swallowed hard. Yes, I said in a small voice. I'd like to be somewhere quiet with you now. Please. Even though I was making him leave his part early, a slight smile came across his face, and he leaned down to give me a gentle kiss that made me melt into him. Of course, he said, and he took my hand in his.
Chapter 8. Donovan.
Gwen was quiet on the way back to the house, her small hand resting on my thigh the whole way back. When I glanced at her during the drive, she looked dreamlike, far away. A part of me relished the quiet. So many women who had sat where she was now had filled the air with words, trying to land a hook in me that would take. Another part of me wanted her to speak again. She wasn't loud, but silence felt like a strange garment on her. When we were inside, I turned her to me with a slight smile, brushing a lock of hair out of her eyes. Do you need to sleep right now? I asked softly. There was a worn look in her eyes, as if the evening had taken more out of her than she expected, but to my surprise, she shook her head firmly. I don't need to sleep right now, she said. I want to give you your present. I raised my eyebrow, tilting my head at her. She frowned. You did say that I could get you something. I did. I guess I'm surprised you remembered, I admitted. She smiled a little at that. Well, I couldn't find anything to buy you. I guess all those magazine articles were right, and buying gifts for the man who has everything is more difficult than I thought it would be. But I do have a present for you. Would you sit down in that chair, please? I sat down in the armchair she indicated, and watched in fascination as she fussed around the living room. First she removed her shawl, revealing her bare arms and her curves in that gorgeous dress, and then she stood just a few feet in front of me, her eyes on the ground. For a single irresistibly hot moment, I thought she was going to strip, and then she started to sing. I have wandered far, seeking the only star I ever knew. Her voice was almost piercingly sweet, perfectly controlled and lovely. I had heard it before, of course, but this was different. There was a quality in her voice that could have moved a stone to tears, and I felt frozen as I listened to her. I couldn't take my eyes away from her if I wanted to, and it almost felt as if my heart had gone hot and still in my chest. Though it felt that she sang with all of her heart, Gwen kept her eyes on the floor, and even as her melody wove around us, I found myself wanting more than anything to see her eyes. Look at me, I thought. I needed to see her. She was within reach, but there was something almost profane about touching her when she was in this state. It would feel like taking a masterpiece painting and smashing it on the ground. Instead, I listened, hearing her words about a bird that led a girl to her love, and all of the difficulties she had to face while searching for him. In the end, they fell into each other's arms, and at that moment Gwen looked up at me, her eyes glowing as the song subsided on the last note, and she fell silent. The silence stretched between us, and she clasped her hands lightly in front of her as if she were nervous. Well, I hope you liked it, she said, searching my face for some sign of approval. I've been working on it for a while, but, well, I guess it didn't come together until just today. So I was the first one to hear it. I got up and crossed the floor to stand in front of Gwen. She looked away, but I touched her chin, making her look up again. Gwen. You were, she said, her voice shaking just a little. I wanted you to be the first one to hear it. It was for you. In every way that matters. She was shivering a little, and then there was nothing in the world that could have kept me from taking her in my arms. It was the best present anyone has ever given me, I rasped, drawing her closer to me. I loved it. Love was not a word that ever fell lightly from my lips, and the awareness lingered that I might love far more than her beautiful gift, though I didn't allow myself to dwell on it. I want you, I growled, kissing her throat. I can't resist you. She sighed with pleasure as I kissed her, wrapping around me tightly. I don't just want you to, Gwen said quietly. I need you. Over the years, women have said the most extravagant things to me, trying to convince me of their devotion. Something about Gwen's quiet confession, soft almost a whisper, tore right at my heart and made me hold her closer. Rare precious beauty, I whispered, carrying her into the bedroom. Gwen breathed a soft sigh of pleasure when I laid her down on the bed. I hesitated a moment. I liked taking the lead and craved it most times, but what I wanted most right now was to please Gwen. Tell me what you want, I said, and smiled a little when it brought a flush of color to her cheeks. I don't know, she murmured, and I tilted my head to one side. I think you do, I murmured silkily. I think when I said that, something flashed in your mind. Why don't you tell me what that was, my darling? She swallowed, and I could hear the click of her dry throat. I want you to love me, she said. Thoughtlessly, I laughed a little at her antiquated language. It was a little quaint, but perfect for her. There was a flash of hurt across her face, and to soothe her, I kissed her soft mouth gently. Of course I will, darling. Gosh, you're perfect, I murmured, but from the soft way she breathed, I didn't even think she had heard it. No, don't leave, Gwen murmured softly, reaching for me, and I shook my head. I'll be right back, darling, I promised. I just want to take good care of you. It was the truth, I realized. I wanted to make her feel good. I wanted to dress her in beautiful clothes. I wanted to make sure she had all of the time in the world to sing and to write her music, just so long as she would smile at me while she did it. Before I was done, she had dropped off to a deep sleep. I crawled into the bed beside her, and as if we had slept together for years, she snuggled up next to me. Can I keep her? The dangerous thought wandered unbidden through my mind, though I had long ago dismissed the thought of getting married, and I pulled away from it now. I fell asleep to the idea of her traveling with me, of giving her an apartment that would delight her, all the while keeping her as close to me as I could.
Chapter 9. Gwen.
Hey, watch it. I yelled, hanging on to the tall pile of dirty dishes with all of my might. Somehow, I managed to keep them from clattering to the ground, and the busboy only shot me an aggrieved look as he hustled back to the kitchen. I started to go after him, but Andrea placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. Time for a break, babe, she said firmly. We're out of the weeds now, and you're overdue. I wanted to argue with her, but she was right. I dropped off the plates and followed her out to the courtyard to sit and to be out of the dining room for a moment. How long have you been waiting tables? She asked, and I shrugged. Since I was 15 or so? Yeah, that checks out. The point is, I've known you for years, and I've never seen you come close to taking a spill as bad as the one that almost happened now. What's up? Is Mystery Man making you miserable? I blushed a little at that. Sometimes, I wished I smoked just so I had something to do with my hands during awkward talks. I'm fine, I protested, but she shook her head. Hun, it looks to me like you got man problems. What's the real problem? He married or something? No. I said, offended, but Andrea shrugged. Figured it was worth asking. Can't think of too many reasons you might want to keep your man away from us. Carly was wondering if it was because he was a jerk, but I thought you were too smart for that. I was thinking maybe he was married. He's not, I said, looking down. I hadn't been able to keep the fact that I was dating someone away from the sharp women I worked with, but I knew instinctively not to tell them about the arrangement that Donovan and I had somehow settled on. I care about you, he had bluntly informed me on the jet ride back to Florida. Very much. But you should know what you are getting when you are with me. I'd listened as he'd spoken of wanting to take care of me, to spend time with me. But then, he'd also cautioned me not to expect anything like marriage out of him. He'd informed me that if and when things ended, I was not to chase him. I had been so shocked by his blunt assessment of our relationship that I hadn't known what to say, and while I'd fumbled for the right words, he had taken my hand, squeezing it slightly. I'm not going to force you into anything, Gwen. I never will. But I want you. I care for you. I want to make you feel things that you haven't ever imagined before. But it needs to be your choice. He had said that, and it had been on the tip of my tongue to tell him no, that I believed the songs I sang. I wanted love, passion, and romance. Before I could, though, I had looked into his eyes and seen a kind of vulnerability there that shocked me. His eyes were always so dark, but in that moment, I'd noticed a kind of longing there that I'd previously missed. Don't leave me. There was more to Donovan than he let on, and in that single moment, I had decided to risk it all on my instincts. All right, I said. I don't promise that I can do this, but I want to try. Donovan had looked immeasurably satisfied, and when he took my hand, there was something victorious about it. Good, he said. You won't regret it. As romantic declarations went, it wasn't what I had always dreamed of, but Donovan, in his own way, made up for it. He was mystified that I wanted to keep working. If he'd had his way, he would have kept me in one of the apartments he owned or even in the penthouse itself. Instead, I insisted on working, and at night. I still couldn't reconcile the passion that Donovan woke in me with the person I had been all my life. He took me to heights I had never dreamed of, and when I returned to the world, shaken by my own response, he held me close with gentle kisses that I could barely believe came from the same man. I felt safe, desired, cared for, and perfect when I was with him. Away from him, I didn't know what to think. I hadn't known until just now that it was getting obvious enough that my coworkers were keeping worried eyes on it, and I sat quietly for a moment before turning back to Andrea. "I'm really fine," I said. "I guess I've just had a lot to think about." Andrea snorted, shaking her head. "Sure, I'll believe that. You should bring him out sometime and see if he passes muster. If he doesn't, we'll send him packing." I choked back a laugh, thinking about Donovan coming out for drinks with the restaurant staff. I couldn't imagine that ending well, and I brought myself up short. He wasn't the one who had told me to keep our relationship a secret. He hadn't said anything of the sort. That was one demand he had not made. I had just done it on my own, and I suddenly felt more than a little strange. There were dozens of reasons to keep our relationship quiet. Donovan owned the hotel. People might get jealous. They might start making all kinds of inferences about what I did or why I did it, and I didn't want that. Had I done something wrong? I was still thinking about that when I went to take the next round of orders. I wanted whatever it was that I had with Donovan to go well, but did I even know what a healthy relationship between the two of us might look like? "Hi, I'm Gwen, and I'll be taking your order today. Can I get you started with some drinks?" I said it dozens of times every day, but when I looked down at the woman who had just been seated, I felt the next words freeze in my mouth. "Oh my gosh, Gwen," said Jordan. "What in the name of little green tomatoes are you doing here?" Her words might have been kind, but her tone was positively delighted. "I work here," I said stiffly. The last time I saw this woman, I was dressed in clothes that cost far more than my rent. Now I was in my usual drab restaurant uniform, and though I had never been ashamed of putting in a decent day's work before, I could feel an unpleasant heat prickling across my cheek. "Oh well, isn't that delightful," she said, grinning and showing her teeth. "I was planning to get in touch with you after the gala, and for the life of me, I couldn't track you down. I guess I didn't think to look here, though perhaps I should have. I know that Donovan is in residence here somewhere, isn't he?" "He is," I said automatically, and flinched a little when Jordan's smile got even wider. "But I really should be speaking to you about the specials. I'm on the job." If anything, Jordan's smile got wider. She leaned forward in her chair a little, and all I could think about was a big cat getting ready to strike. "Oh, I don't think you need to worry about that right this moment, do you? We're just having a little chat. I'm sure the manager won't mind." I fiddled uncertainly with my pad and pencil, and Jordan looked me over. I could tell that she was taking in all of it, the uniform, the lank hair, the slight sheen of sweat from having been on my feet all day. My, I had no idea that Donovan was picking up friends at work. "And here I thought you were from up the coast. You know, someone important." I would never have called myself important at all, but when I heard her dismissal, it stung. "Well, you certainly did fool a lot of people," she purred. "There was more than one gentleman there who didn't know you were with Donovan Fox and was interested in an introduction. Won't they be surprised?" She paused like a cat relishing playing with a mouse. "And Donovan, my goodness. I thought he knew better than to play with the help." I'd had enough, but it wasn't for the reasons that Jordan thought. I spun on my heel and dashed back to the kitchen, and all the way back, I wasn't thinking of Jordan at all. Instead, I thought of Donovan and the feelings I had for him. I wasn't the thing that Jordan implied I was, but then I realized that for all rights and purposes, I was. I was the girl who worked the restaurant rush. I was something that Donovan was playing with, no matter how kind he was about it. It was true, and Jordan was just the straw that broke the camel's back. This needed to end. "Gwen, what the hell? Are you all right?" Something about the desperate look on my face told Gus not to argue when I hurried for the lockers. "I'm done, I need to be gone," I said. "Gone? As in, are you quitting?" he asked in disbelief. "Yes, no." I shook my head. knowing that such a wishy-washy response was not going to do me any favors. I just need to be gone. Just gone. I stayed in the locker room until I had stopped shaking, and I suppose I must have looked terrible because no one bothered me. Instead, they let me sit for an hour or more, and then finally, I was able to change into street clothes and pack my bag to leave. I crossed the atrium on my way out, and with a panicked pang, I saw Donovan and Jordan talking and laughing at the entrance. Donovan had some papers in his hand, but he looked down at Jordan with amusement and affection. Jordan looked positively coquettish as she tilted her face up towards him, and as I watched, she touched the buttons on his shirt lightly with her fingertips. "That's what Donovan's real match looks like," whispered a small voice in my mind. "That's what he needs." I swallowed hard, trying to keep myself from falling to pieces, and then I was gone. Just gone.
Chapter 10. Donovan.
Gwen had turned her phone off that afternoon. She never did that, and it bewildered me. When I called the restaurant, they told me with some asperity that she had left far earlier than she should have. I felt a strange prickle up the back of my neck, but refused to pay it any attention. Of course Gwen was fine. I refused to believe she could be anything else. Then she didn't show up for our dinner date that evening, and an unnerving, unfamiliar fear ran down my spine. I called her again, but her phone was off, and in desperation, I tracked down her address online and drove over to her place, thinking about all of the reasonable things I wanted to say, however angry and worried she had made me. Then when she opened the door, red-eyed and dressed in plain shorts and a baggy t-shirt, I forgot all of them. "I don't care to be stood up," I said, staring down at her, but she only shook her head dully. "I can't do this anymore," she said softly. "I'm sorry. I can't. I'm not what you want me to be, and I'm definitely not what people think I am." "What are you talking about?" I demanded. I reached forward to touch her, but she drew away. I felt a hot pang go through me, and I bit down on it hard. "I'm saying that it's over, I think," she said in a small voice. "I can't keep doing this. You're right. It's not romance. It's something else, and I can't do it." "You agreed to this," I said, my voice thudding like a hammer. "We've been doing it for nearly a month now." "And now it's over," she said with a tired shrug. "It's time I get back to my life, and you get back to yours, to the hotel, to Jordan. You said you would never force me, and so now that I want out, you have to respect that. You don't get to chase me either, Donovan." Hearing my words thrown back in my face, however gently, was like a bucket of ice water. For a moment, I wanted to snarl at her. To hell with that. No one told me what I had to respect, what I had to bow to. Not when I wanted Gwen like fire, not when something in me cried for her, as the one source of pure goodness and truth and beauty in my world. "Gwen." "No," she said, her voice cracking. "I can't do this. I won't do this. You said this wasn't romance or a proper relationship. So it's not a breakup. It's just an end, Donovan. You need to leave." I opened my mouth to argue with her again, but then she looked up at me, wide-eyed and desperate. That was when I knew that I could never do anything that would bring her pain. There was so much pain in her gaze that it broke my heart. "Sweetheart, this isn't." Her voice cracked and her eyes, already so red from crying, gleamed once again with unshed tears. "This isn't something where you can give me orders," she said softly. "This is real life. We had some kind of wonderful fantasy, but it's over now. I'm done. I have to be." What else was there for me to say? I stood back. I reached for her, wanting to touch her face one last time, but I stopped myself. She watched me with those beautiful eyes, and I wondered if she was afraid I could talk her into coming back with me. I cleared my throat, my voice gone unexpectedly rusty. "Goodbye, Gwen." I walked down the long, musty hallway of her apartment, listening for the click of the door as she closed it after me. It never came, and instead I could feel her gaze on my back until I turned the corner. In a haze, I drove back to the hotel and found myself in the penthouse because where the hell else was I going to go? The place was exactly the same as it had been a few hours ago when I had been blithely expecting Gwen to return, but as the sun set, giving the room long and searching shadows, it took on a haunted quality. I was being ridiculous, and I knew it. I stalked to the bar, where I poured myself 2 fingers of whiskey into a cut glass tumbler. The strong smoky burn returned me to myself, but maybe that was the moment where I realized I didn't really like that self all that much. There was a small mirror set behind the bar, and when I glanced at myself in it, I felt a wave of anger and disgust well up in me. I pitched the glass at the mirror with all my strength. The shattering sound was felt not good but right. It felt so good that I reached for another glass, and after throwing down another few fingers of whiskey, I did it again. I woke up the next morning with a pounding head, sprawled on the couch and surrounded by the wreckage of my own idiocy. The pale light coming in the window told me that it was barely past dawn, but there was no way I could get back to sleep, no matter how appealing unconsciousness felt right now. All that mattered to me was that Gwen was gone, and she wasn't coming back. Somehow, I had pushed her away, and then I had let her simply go without fighting. I let the intense pain of that roar up inside me, felt all its hot edges and its terrifying fury, and when it subsided to a slightly more functional level, I finally breathed. Gwen was something special, and though I could physically live without her, it would be hell, and there would likely not be much left of me at the end of it. Gwen made me better in every possible way. I was kinder around her, more honest, more appreciative of the beauty of a world that all my money sometimes occluded. Though I admittedly hadn't been very kind with that airplane speech. The memory made my gut clench, and the alcohol still flooding my veins roiled in warning. As I fought the nausea, a memory tugged at my mind. During that terrible encounter at her little apartment, she had mentioned Jordan. Why the hell would she mention Jordan? I knew Jordan was staying at the hotel, but she hadn't mentioned running into Gwen. I felt something like ice reach inside my chest and freeze hard. It helped. It gave me a place to put away the rage, the heat, and the fear. I showered using that perfect cold to keep me going. I shaved, dressed in new clothes, and called down to housekeeping to let them know there was a serious mess in the penthouse. Honestly, I was more of a mess than anything I'd destroyed last night, but they couldn't help me. Only one person could. I knew that this cold couldn't last long. If it did, it might last forever, and I got a vivid idea of what life might be like without Gwen. Finally, I took a deep breath and reached for my phone. "Why, Donovan?" Jordan purred, her voice low and sensuous. There was a time when it would have at least piqued my interest, but now it only infuriated me. "I need to talk to you," I growled. "I'm coming down to your room." A pause. "Well, that's a lovely surprise." "Shut up," I said. "I want answers."
Chapter 11. Gwen.
Carly got me the waitressing job across town. It wasn't as nice as the job at the hotel, and frankly, the owner gave me the creeps, but at the end of the day, it was work, and I needed it. I wasn't going back to Fox Hotel and Suites, not for any amount of money. Gus begged something I never thought I'd see, but I was unwilling to take the chance of running into Donovan and Jordan, arm in arm, laughing together. Though I wanted Donovan to be happy, I knew what I could tolerate, and seeing that was something I considered a physical impossibility. I'd lose it. I had ended things with Donovan almost 2 weeks ago, but though my mind knew it, my body and my heart weren't playing along. My body still tingled sometimes where he had touched me. My heart still leapt whenever I saw a man who was his size and with his hair color. I was a mess, and I couldn't even say that I had learned my lesson. Somewhere underneath it all, I would have gone back if he had been willing to ask for me, to fight for me. But of course, he wouldn't. No chasing. With my roommate out of town for a conference, I spent my work daydreaming about getting home, kicking off my shoes, and trying to find my way back to the music that had temporarily gone to sleep inside me. At least, that's what I thought I was going to do before I walked up to the building and found Donovan seated on the front steps, waiting for me. His eyes were closed, his face tilted up to catch the last rays of the setting sun, and for one shocked moment, I simply took in the dark circles under his eyes, the hard set of his jaw. Then Donovan opened his eyes and looked at me, and there was such a depth of pain in his gaze that I nearly cried out. "Gwen," he said, and in a moment he was on his feet, throwing his arms around me in an embrace that felt almost desperate. I stood stiffly, not daring to let down my guard. "Donovan, what are you doing here?" "I came for you," he said, pulling back just a little. "Gwen, I need you." Gosh, how many times had I imagined him coming to me and saying just that, but I couldn't do it. Not when his kind of need would eventually kill me with its indifference. "Donovan, I can't do this again," I whispered, stepping back. "I'm sorry. Please go." Donovan looked devastated for a moment, but then a fierce look came over his face, dark and possessive. When I tried to draw back, one hand fell on my shoulder, and the other cupped my face, bringing my gaze up to his again. "No. Not until you've heard what I have to say. Then I'll leave. I'll never see you again if that's what you want, but you need to hear me now." I nodded, unable to talk for the lump in my throat. When he saw that I was going to listen, Donovan took a deep breath. "I need you in my life," he said, his voice urgent. "When you left, I felt as if I had been set at sea on a boat with no sail and no rudder. It was empty without you, and the emptiness felt like it was going to reach up and devour me." He so closely described the emotions that I had been feeling all month that I gasped. Once I had tried to sit down and to write it into a song, but it had only made me cry. "Donovan. Let me finish, please. Then. I suppose you can do as you see fit. I can't stop you, and if you think you would be happier without me, I suppose I will find a way to live with it. But Gwen, do you really want to? We were good, so good together. You made me feel like no one ever has before. I nearly killed Jordan when I realized she had said that to you. You belong with me. I can change. I want to change because it's you. You are the only woman that I have ever had these feelings for. Gwen, I need you. Not just your voice or your body. All of you. Your heart. Your eyes. Your smile. Your shy, sweet beauty. Gosh, Gwen. I love you. Please." The look on his face was haunted as he said words I was sure he'd never before said to anybody. And yet, I swallowed hard. I wanted to say yes, to fall into his arms and to let him take care of everything again. I couldn't though. Not with a man who didn't know me well enough to know what I wanted, a man who could turn away and just let me leave. "I can't," I said, and I started to walk away blindly. From behind me, I could feel more than hear Donovan draw in his breath, and then, amazingly, he started to sing. His voice was low and cracked slightly. It was a good voice but untrained, and the song had been written for my soprano. She fell in love down a deep, deep well, and there was no one to tell her no. I turned around in disbelief, and Donovan kept on singing, his voice breaking more than it had before. It was my song, the song I had sung to him once. He sang about love as I saw it, as I needed it to be, and with a choked cry I spun around and threw myself into his arms. "Thank God," he muttered raggedly, holding me so tight I could barely breathe, and I didn't want to. I never wanted to breathe again without his arms around me. Tilting my chin up, he kissed my lips, then my eyes, my nose, my forehead, whispering, "Gosh, I love you, Gwen. I'm so sorry. Please don't ever leave me." I looked up into his eyes, swept away by the depths of the truth in them. "I love you too, Donovan. So much. But it has to be different this time. I already love you. You don't need to buy me." He kissed me again, threading his fingers through my hair and rubbing the ball of his thumb gently over the curve of my cheek. "It will be. Because so help me, Gwen, if you walk out again, I'll chase you next time. And you damn well better come after me if I do anything stupid. His eyes gleamed and I smiled into them, leaning up into his hungry, passionate kiss as he lifted me into his powerful arms. Deal.
Epilogue. Gwen.
I barely recognized myself in the mirror. The gleaming white dress was almost heavier than I was. I looked like a fairy tale princess. Just 20 minutes until we start, the wedding coordinator told me, and then the door closed and I was left alone in the bride's dressing room. Carly and Andrea were waiting just outside, lovely in their coral dresses, and somewhere beyond them was Donovan. I was going to be married today, and my heart sang a song I could only dream of capturing someday. I looked up in surprise as the inner door, one that led to a joined dressing room, opened. I thought it would be the photographer again, or the wedding coordinator, but it was Donovan. "Hello, Songbird," he said with a grin, striding up to me. He was achingly handsome in his tux, and I fell into his arms for an embrace before drawing back. "Donovan, what are you doing here?" They said I had a few minutes before everything was going to start, and there was only one person I wanted to spend that time with. "Gosh, you look amazing." He smiled so hugely that I relented even as I chided, "It's bad luck for you to see me before the wedding." "It's never going to be bad luck for me to see you," Donovan said tenderly. "I promise I'll act surprised. I need you, Gwen." As always, hearing that from him melted me, and I fell into his arms, forgetting the dress because nothing was more important than this man. This man who I thought had lost a year back, who came back to me, who had spent the last year showing me the side of him no one else had ever seen. His darkness remained, the darkness that had so attracted me initially, and I would never wish it gone. But it was also offset now by words of love and promises that he kept, such as the Billionaire conference that he'd arranged where I actually did get to sing this time. The conference that had started me down the path to a recording contract, one Donovan hadn't needed to buy for me, he'd simply shared me with the world for that evening, and that had been everything. He was everything here now as he kissed me, sweetly careful of the makeup that had taken so long to put on, smoothing his fingers down my cheek and gazing into my eyes. "You're sure?" he asked, touchingly serious. "You want me forever?" "Because, Songbird, I have no intention of letting you go once I have a ring on your finger. I wouldn't have let you go before, but even more so now." "I'm sure," I promised, drawing him down into another kiss. "Tonight I'll sing for my new husband." When Donovan drew back, the emotion was so stark in his gaze that if there hadn't been a wedding party standing outside, I'd likely have dragged him to the nearest bed. His unabashed adoration never failed to move me in every possible way. "I better go," he said reluctantly, trying to smooth my dress which had wrinkled just very slightly. "Meet me at the altar in 15?" I grinned. I wouldn't miss it for the world. "You are the world, Gwen love," he said huskily. "My whole world." And for the rest of our lives, from this day forth to have and to hold, he would be mine. There was a song in that, definitely, but it was put on hold indefinitely as the man of my dreams drew me in for another kiss, and we spent the last few minutes before our wedding together. Just as we always would.
The end.
Please listen to this sneak peek for The Dom Next Door. The Dom Next Door, Chapter 1. Emmeline.
Hi, Mom. Hi, Dad. Sorry I haven't visited in a while. My coat is too thin for this weather. The chilly breeze blows across the hillside and rustles the flattened dead grass before cutting through the wool. It's the only black coat I have, however, and I've been using it exclusively for a year for just that reason. Mom and Dad had insisted in their living will on a burial on the same low hill where our ancestors' graves have sat for centuries. The small mausoleum, a plain filing box for 2 coffins, sits before me as I crouch down with the icy wind at my back. It's snowing again. Second time this winter. It's crazy. Cars are piling up on the highways, and over in Florida, the iguanas are falling out of trees from the cold. Can you imagine? My laugh is small, awkward, and hollow, and the wind carries it away quickly. This doesn't feel like New Orleans. There shouldn't be snow here. This winter feels wrong. But things have felt wrong for months now. None of it makes sense, but I'm not all that surprised. My whole world has felt crazy ever since my parents died. I'm not going to the convent after all. I know, I said I was doing that right after junior college, but I'm realizing more and more that after what happened to you, my faith just didn't end up being my rock like I thought it was. My voice breaks and I go silent, cold tears tracking down my cheeks. The Mother Superior of the convent I had been seeking membership with was very sympathetic, but she didn't understand. But she'd also never seen her parents blown up right in front of her. Seen? No, felt. My whole vision had been whited out by the fireball. One moment, I was walking to the car, my dad talking to me from the driver's side, teasing me gently for forgetting my phone while my mother hid a smile. The next, a tremendous blast of heat hit me and hurtled me backward, my own awkward smile barely having time to die before I landed in our hedge. After that, everything went black. I spent last January in the hospital, first for burns and cracked ribs and then for post-traumatic stress. They released me with a clean bill of health, but they were dead wrong. Mom and Dad have been in their grave a year, and I haven't felt right or healthy in all that time. I can function day to day now, I can manage my money, and I have my own house. But part of me died that day with my parents. I woke up in the hospital without it, and haven't been able to find it since. I'm sorry, Mom. I know you were proud when I decided to devote myself to God. But I can't join a religious order without faith. The faith that had sustained me since I was 6 years old, which I had turned to over and over again when my sister Shayla wreaked havoc in my life, crumbled like sand in the face of that explosion. The arsonist hasn't been caught. Shayla is 3 times worse without my parents' disapproval to restrain her, and every comforting word from a priest or the Bible no longer comforts. The tears won't stop. In the time since my parents have been gone, I've slowly been able to cut down on the public sobbing fits, hating to embarrass myself like that. But right now, I can forgive myself for breaking down a little. I'm going back to college. I'll finish my degree and then, well, I'm not sure. But I'll try to find some way to make you proud of me. I hope. Lucky for me that my half of the inheritance will carry me my whole life, even if I were never able to handle a job again. I still can't get along with Shayla, I mumble, wiping my cheeks again. She pushed me into leaving home. I could only turn the other cheek so many times, so I left. I'm sure she planned it that way. I think you would like my new house, though. It's not very big, but it's well restored, it's clean, and it's mine. The neighborhood isn't as nice as ours, but one of the neighbors, well, he's very nice. The thought of Carl, the single dad next door, makes me smile enough that my tears dry for a while. I can't even fully explain how much the thought of him comforts me. Watching him play with his cute little daughter, his huge, powerful form moving so gently around her, always makes me happy. Then there are the dreams I have about him, but I'm not going to go dwelling on them in front of my parents' grave. Still, I giggle a little. I think you would like him. Like who? Snaps a voice behind me and I freeze. The voice is a little distant, and I hear the shuffle of feet coming up through the dead grass. Shayla. I shudder and clench my fists to calm myself, glad at least that she wasn't standing behind me listening the whole time I was lost in my talk with the dead. None of your business, I say as firmly as I can, cursing the tiny shake I can hear in my voice as she stalks around me and dumps an enormous bouquet atop the mausoleum. Purple monkshood clashes gaudily with orange lilies, hot pink snapdragons, and blood-colored rhododendron, crowding out my simple garland of white roses. I can't believe you're up here talking to a couple of corpses in a marble box. They're dead, you melodramatic twit. Life after death is a myth, just like your God. I hold myself very still, the anger and resentment I've felt for as long as I can remember burning inside of me like an ember. I won't give her the satisfaction of breaking down in front of her, or of losing my temper. Either reaction will leave that narcissistic cow thinking she's in control. Emmeline, can you hear me? Or did your shrink put you on more tranquilizers? Her voice is a mocking whine as she turns to confront me. I straighten, lifting my head, and meet her sharp, dark gaze with my own. My sister looks older and crueler every time I see her. Her mouth is a narrow, dry slit thinly lined in dark red, her eyes are sunken and hold a greedy gleam, and her straight russet bronze hair, so like my own, has been clipped to her jawline and streaked with gold. She wears a silk suit the exact color of her lipstick with no blouse underneath, her silicone-enhanced cleavage tastelessly exposed. On the whole, she's wearing too much musky perfume and too much gold, too many jewels, and not one single indication of grief or loss. That's my big sister, making wealthy, slutty sociopathy fashionable again. She seems absolutely stunned by my mute, expressionless examination of her. She doesn't understand how done I am with her. She has never been able to understand boundaries, even when my father would shout at her at the top of his lungs for her latest round of household thefts, she'd always claim he was overreacting. She's immune from guilt. But she's absolutely unused to my standing up to her. Shayla, I've put up with a lot of your nonsense over the years, but I refuse to do it at our parents' grave. Knock it off or we're done for good. She's blinking very rapidly now, her vain, narrow little mind struggling to process where my show of backbone came from. The thing is, I always had a backbone, I just wasn't confrontational. I was shy and kind instead. Instead of punching my sister in the face when she stole my clothes and ruined them or was cruel to me at school, I turned the other cheek, prayed, and felt better. I listened to my apologetic parents, trying to explain to me that Shayla was sick, that she couldn't help herself, and that I had to be strong. I did as they asked for the sake of family harmony. But then my parents' car exploded with them in it, and I just stepped away from joining them. If I hadn't gone back for my phone, I would have died with them. Shayla didn't visit me in the hospital. She greeted me without warmth or sympathy when I returned. Instead, upon hearing that I wasn't going to join a convent as I had planned, she drove me out of our family home, claiming it for herself. Her ways of driving me out had been very effective, making sure that I couldn't stay no matter how much I wanted to. Banging on my door at all hours of the night. Breaking into my room. Stealing and breaking my things. Screaming at me and lecturing me every day, sometimes for hours. I left as soon as I could gather enough of my inheritance together to pay for my new home in cash. That was months ago, and the venom still hasn't left my veins. Instead, it's killed my ability to give a single damn about being nice to Shayla. I can't believe you. How rude can you be? Telling me to shut up. I'm only saying these things for your own good. You came into this conversation being the biggest pain you could be, and now you're hurt that I'm not happy to see you? I snort, tucking a few strands of hair behind my ear that have escaped my braid. Drop the act. Nobody's ever happy to see you, Shayla, because you're a soulless person. When in the hell did the aspiring nun take up swearing? She finally manages to mumble. She sounds incredulous, as if I've suddenly sprouted a pair of devil horns. I'm not an aspiring nun anymore, I growl, scooping up my shoulder bag and turning to go. Wait. We have to talk about finances. She starts to move to intercept me, but I step quickly away from her and stalk off down the hill. My Doc Martens have better purchase on the slippery hillside than her stiletto heels, and I hear her yelp with dismay as she falls behind. Come back here, you rude little tramp. I'm cold all over by the time I reach my pickup, but I refuse to let the tears fall. My grief curdles my stomach, but I won't take even the slightest chance that Shayla might catch me crying. If she finds me in tears, she will laugh. Through the rage, I feel an unexpected surge of pride in how I'm handling this. I actually stood up to her. It was bitter, mean, and clumsy, but I did it. I don't even let myself wonder why she's trying to talk to me about money, except, of course, that it's the thing she loves best in the world. Maybe she's after my half of the inheritance. She's always been jealous of anything my parents gave me, including life. When I was little, I tried so hard to get Shayla to like me. I used to cry with frustration over it, and that would make her laugh with delight at how hard I was trying, even though I always failed. Now, as I drive home in uncharacteristically thin New Orleans traffic, I think to myself that the only effort she'll be getting from me from now on is the bare minimum it takes to keep me from beating her physically and landing in jail. A tiny heartbroken part of me, the part who realizes that Shayla is the only family I have left in the world now that Mom and Dad are gone, knows that I should hurt unbearably. But instead, the whole encounter has just left me very, very tired. When I pull up in front of the stately white home, with its double wraparound porches and iron railings, I have to take a breath for a moment before pulling into the driveway. But the tall iron gates open automatically at my truck's approach, and I drive inside unchallenged. Once I've parked the truck in the open carport, I walk inside and feel a wave of relief wash over me. Alone. Alone in my own home, which I bought with my own money in a safe neighborhood far from my sister. How wonderful to not have to share a space with her after those months of psychological warfare. Maybe next time I see her, I should say goodbye for good and lift the weight of knowing her from my heart forever. It won't make up for my losses, but it will sure make my life easier. She's petty and cruel to me. She never shed a single tear over our parents. There's nothing there to miss. The house is mostly barren inside. The only parts that I have fully furnished so far are the kitchen, one bathroom, and the master bedroom. I pass by a living room that is still piled with boxes I just haven't opened yet. Moving had exhausted me, like so much else does these days. Now I just make myself unpack and set up a few things a day, and stop when I start to get weepy or sick. The encounter with Shayla has left me even more drained than usual, to the point where I can feel myself shaking slightly. I decide on a nap. My therapist has worked hard to get me to look after myself better, especially when I start showing warning signs of a meltdown. Apparently some of it has sunk in. My bedroom is exactly as I had dreamed it would look back when I was a little girl, and couldn't have any elegant things thanks to my sister. The enormous white iron canopy bed, with its frame draped in fairy lights and multicolored gauze, the patchwork velvet coverlet in copper and green, the Susan Selden Boulay prints of unicorns and women hanging on the white plaster walls, all of them new and undamaged. It's a haven for me, one I'm grateful to have after the trials of the last year. In the afternoons when I take my naps, I fall asleep to birdsong. In the mornings when I can sleep as long as I need without being shouted at, I wake up to the same songs. And sometimes I also hear a deep voice calling happily, and a little girl giggling, and that is the best thing around here to wake up to. Carl, the grizzled mystery man next door who loves his daughter and fills her days with laughter and joy. He's huge compared to me, all muscle with shaggy blonde hair, narrow blue eyes, and a smile like the sun coming up. I can pretty much remember the exact moment that I fell in love with him. I was directing the small group of gardeners I'd hired to tame the then jungle in my backyard, when I saw him playing with his daughter for the first time. I didn't mean to spy on them exactly, I never do, but on that day I was captivated. As I watched him being so kind and gentle with the girl, I wondered, would he be just as kind and tender with the woman he loves as well? The dreams of him had started almost right away. I welcome them because they drown out the nightmares. I would rather wake up shivering in the middle of the night with unfamiliar pleasure and need than with terror and loss. Those dreams, those feelings, are like an invitation away from despair and back to life. This time, I don't dream of anything at all. But I smile, really smile, for the first time that day, when that now familiar sound wakes me up. It's that lovely deep voice again, singing a few bits of a kid's song while his little girl giggles louder and louder. Spirits lifting, I head to my window to watch.
Chapter 2. Col.
The cute little lady next door is watching us again. She's harmless, so I don't mind. I get the impression that she's shy and awkward more than anything. Skittish like a stray kitten. My guess is she's recovering from something. Her shyness, her listlessness, her lack of visitors, They all point to someone who has withdrawn to lick her wounds. She seems like someone who needs to be taken care of. And when I look at her, I think that I really wouldn't mind volunteering. She's adorable. Statuesque and sensual but demure, with wide dark eyes I could fall into and a gorgeous mane of auburn hair she braids and ties up like a librarian. She always dresses modestly, but her body seems to rebel against it. Now and again, I'm very tempted to go over and introduce myself, but I'm waiting for her to work up the nerve instead. I don't want to impose on her, she might get scared away. But when I see the longing way she looks at me, when she thinks I can't see her, I started thinking about what it would be like to have her. I haven't had a woman in my life since Jenny's mama died, and she wasn't into the kind of play that I am. I was loyal, so I let that part of myself go unsatisfied. But ever since I felt ready to move on after Mary, I've been looking for that special someone who won't be satisfied without a good man's firm hand to guide her. In the bedroom, anyway. Outside of that, I need someone who loves kids and can deal with the rest of my life. You don't make $1 billion on legal pot without getting your seed money somewhere a little shady. And once Jenny's off to bed, I still like to smoke every now and then. It's tough to find someone who's really compatible with everything I am and want. But after the sad mess with Mary, I'm absolutely done with settling. You do that and it doesn't work out, and then you feel like an idiot for making sacrifices for something doomed from the start. She wasn't a bad person, I loved her, I really did. But she was carrying something besides our baby, something she didn't talk about. Postpartum depression just finally brought it out in her. I don't like thinking about how she died, or how she tried to take Jenny with her. I'm just glad Jenny was so tiny then, that she doesn't remember any of it. I don't hate Mary, but I hate the thing inside of her that made her so horribly crafty and selfish in the end, like a woman possessed. Now I stay alone by staying picky. But as I look up to see young Miss Emmeline looking down at me wistfully from her upstairs window, I start to wonder if I couldn't try seeing how we work together. If nothing else, it could make for a very interesting fling. At this point in my life, I'm hoping for more though. After 3.5 years, Jenny is independent and well-behaved enough for us to add to our little family. Okay, kiddo. Are your eyes closed? Uh-huh. Jenny has her eyes closed and covered, biting her lip with amusement. I go to the shed, where I tucked her present shortly before summoning her away from her cartoons, and bring out the covered dog crate within. I set it down next to her, uncover it, and after making sure the gate is locked, I open its door. The chubby wagging bundle of golden fur and floppy ears is a pound rescue, with enough golden retriever in him that he goes straight for the little girl and flops against her legs, whine-yapping. I fight a grin, and then glance up at Emmeline's window. She's still standing there, smiling wistfully, but definitely smiling. 2 with 1 stone, I think, as I see her looking happy for once. Or rather, 2 with 1 puppy. Okay, you can open your eyes. Jenny uncovers her eyes and looks down, and her jaw drops. Puppy, she manages to squeak as the furball bows playfully, his whole butt wagging now. She crouches down, and he bounces into her arms, wiggling and licking her face. Oh wow, it's a doggy. Where'd you get a doggy from? He's so cute. She bursts out laughing as he starts licking her ears in a frantic, slobbery tickle attack. I was waiting until you were old enough. But you have to help me look after him, okay? And he's gonna need a name. I managed to tame my big, stupid grin down into something like a kindly smile. I'm gonna think of the best name ever, she declares, and I lose it, snickering. Okay, come on, you guys go play and get to know each other. It'll get cold soon. I keep a careful eye on them as they dash across the lawn together. I have to admit that watching the 2 of them wrestle and chase each other does me a hell of a lot of good on this dreary day. It puts all thoughts of Mary, what she did to herself, and what she almost did to my baby, right out of my head. Jenny and the pup are finally starting to wind down, when I notice a gold Mercedes screech to a stop outside of Emmeline's house. An overdressed woman in a scarlet suit, who looks a little like Emmeline if she'd had 7 years of drug abuse to age her, gets out and stalks up to bang on the gate. My eyes narrow suspiciously. Damn, what is this now? After a minute or two of non-stop, insistent banging, Emmeline emerges from the front door, a dark coat wrapped around her and a wary look on her face. I keep half an eye on the little ones while I eavesdrop, ears pricked for trouble in my neighborhood. What are you doing here? Emmeline sighs, barely audible. You left in the middle of our conversation. I have news from the lawyer. I wanted to make certain that you received it before the day is over. The woman's voice sounds a little like Emmeline's as well, but with an alarming, icy snootiness to it. The lawyer? Emmeline hesitates. I can tell that whoever this relative of hers is, she's an unwanted visitor, probably because she's a complete pain. But family legal matters are important. I wince in sympathy as she reluctantly opens the gate and leads the woman inside. A cold, wary feeling tightens my stomach. I look over at the 2 new playmates, who are dozing off on the lawn despite the cold. All right, you two, I announce in a cheery voice as I scoop a kid up with one arm and a puppy with the other. Let's get you inside to finish watching cartoons. I'll get the doggy crate in a minute. Can we have hot chocolate later? Jenny yawns as I cart her inside. You and me can have hot chocolate, sweetie, but this little guy can't. Chocolate's bad for dogs. I drop them off in front of the TV, make sure I've puppy-proofed everything enough that they'll be fine for a few minutes, and then slip back outside, ears pricked for trouble next door. I've barely shut the dog crate and scooped it up to take it inside when I hear raised voices over there. One is hard and harsh, the other shakes and is full of sadness and outrage. The very thought of cute little Emmeline sounding so unhappy pisses me off, and I set the crate down and head for the side yard that separates our properties. Walking alongside the stone fence on my way to the front yard, I can hear the argument growing so loud and impassioned that I'm starting to be able to make out words. Only let you in because you said the lawyer, comes Emmeline's voice. I speed up a little. My gut is telling me that she's not safe. I trust my instincts. Back in my old business, they kept me alive more than once. Nonsense. You were going to the convent and were giving up your share. That money should be mine. The other woman's screech is so clear that I can only imagine how ear-splitting it must be face to face. That money was left to me by Mom and Dad, same as yours was to you, you greedy tramp. Get out of my face and get out of my home. I never planned to give it to you anyway. You're rich enough and you have our house. I break into a jog, the muscles in my shoulders tightening. As proud as I am that Emmeline's standing up for herself, I know what the long silence that follows her angry statement means. I can feel the tension building next door, like the calm before a storm. Whoever this other woman is, she's selfish and greedy, and from the unbalanced screech in her voice, there's no limit to her rage. I don't want her alone with Emmeline right now, even though I barely know the girl. I'm at a dead run by the time the screaming starts up again. I take the front steps 2 at a time and start banging on the door.
Chapter 3. Emmeline.
Get out of my home. Get out? I don't know where this courage is coming from, but I'm chasing Shayla out step by determined step, while she gives ground slowly toward the door. Her face is dark red with anger, almost the color of her suit, but I can see the fear in her eyes. I'm going to throw up once she's gone. My stomach churns with each step I take and I'm shaking, my hands cold. But I refuse to show any of these signs of weakness to her. She isn't used to me fighting back, and her surprise right now is the only weapon that I have. I'm the oldest, she's yelling nonsensically. I'm the heir, and I don't care what their will says. I'll contest it in court. What the hell do you think this is? I demand as I continue to herd her back into the front hallway. Medieval Britain. And you can contest whatever you want, but all it will do is waste your time and the money you love so much on lawyer fees. That makes her hesitate, which disgusts and angers me even more. I'm not going to let you bully me into giving up what Mom and Dad left to me like you bullied me into leaving our house. It's my money, this is my home, and you're not my superior. For God's sake, Shayla, you need to go back to therapy and stop. She goes from purple to white and back again. Don't talk to me about therapy, Miss Depressed. I'm fine. It's not my fault you could never handle someone with a stronger personality than yours. Being a pushy person doesn't make you strong, Shayla. If you were strong, you'd be enjoying what you have instead of coming after what's mine. My eyes are locked with hers, while inside I marvel at my own unexpected courage. It's all mine. She shrieks suddenly and lunges for me, making me freeze with shock. But she doesn't even touch me before a heavy, insistent knock at the door startles us both. I turn, but Shayla, her anger redirected as quickly as a mad dog's, darts past me and yanks the door open. Who are you? Buzz off. Carl is standing there, arms folded, a thunderous scowl on his face as he stares at Shayla. I freeze, stunned, unable to understand why in the hell he's on my doorstep when he's taken no interest in me for months. That I know of, anyway. But suddenly here he is like a white knight, giving her such a forbidding look that all the bluster goes out of her at once. What are you doing here? She challenges shakily. She folds her skinny arms and lifts her chin, as if it's her house and he just interrupted something sane and normal. But he's not buying it, and she can tell, and that scares her too. Good. I heard screaming over here, he rumbles, his voice so unlike the kind tone he uses with his daughter that it sends a small chill down my spine. I wanted to make sure that Miss Emmeline was not in danger from some intruder. Shayla switches gears, going all fluttery and flustered, half of it a smokescreen but some of it appearing genuine. Oh no, I'm actually Emmeline's older sister. We were just having a private, family discussion. Private? If you wanted to have a private discussion, why could I hear every word from inside my kitchen? That seems to get through to Shayla finally. That's always been her way, to thrive on the uncomfortable silence of a family that is forced to tolerate her. Shocked comments from the neighbors, from a visiting friend, from her own boyfriend, all of them break that silence and throw a spotlight on her behavior. I'm still mortified that he felt the need to step in, and that this is how we're meeting for the first time, me fighting tears and nausea, and with my heartless nut of a sister standing between us. But as Shayla rubs her face convulsively in response, Carl looks past her and stares right at me, and his whole face changes. He gives me a sympathetic look, with the tiniest apologetic smile. As if he's been there, dealing with irrational people who teeter at all times on the edge of becoming dangerous. And I realize with a surge of gratitude and relief that he didn't come here to yell at me. He came here to save me from the person who was yelling at me. I bite my lip and nod back, forcing a tiny smile even as my eyes start to sting dangerously. I've become unaccustomed to kindness now that Mom and Dad are gone. It feels good and hurts at the same time. The feeling mixes with my anguish at dealing with Shayla like an antidote, destroying it and restoring some of my strength. Shayla puts her hand over her mouth and mumbles all fake modesty. Oh, I didn't realize. Shayla, I sigh suddenly, my voice stony and exasperated. Just go away already. You've already embarrassed us both, and you're not for. You're not going to get your way by throwing a tantrum. She shoots me a look of pure hatred and frustration, and then suddenly scuttles out, shoving the screen door open and shouldering rudely past Carl. He steps aside to let her go, watching her flee down the walk with a bemused look on his face. We watch silently until she roars off in her gold Mercedes, as if we're both wary of what she'll do until we can see she's gone for good. Then Carl turns back to me, and his sympathetic look returns. You okay? He asks very gently. I draw in a shivery breath, and let my heartbeat slow a little before trying to speak. Yeah, I murmur, giving him the bravest smile I can manage. I am now. Thank you. I'm so embarrassed that this is how we are finally meeting, that I feel like I have to explain myself. She's not very rational. I noticed. He offers an enormous hand. We only met briefly at that block party last month, but I've noticed you around. Thought about saying hello, but you seem like a pretty private person. I hesitate, then clasp his hand with my own as best I can. His enormous hand closes over mine and surrounds it in brief, leathery warmth. It's all I can do not to whimper at his comforting touch. Why yeah, sorry I left early that day. I was going to introduce myself, but the crowd got kind of overwhelming after a while. I blame Shayla. I was afraid of running into her in that crowd, after a week of obsessive phone calls out of nowhere. If that hadn't happened, maybe I could have spent a little more time at the block party, and become friends with the neighbors I still don't really know. Like Carl. The warmth of his hand sinks into mine, and for a long moment I linger, wishing I could keep holding hands with him without seeming like a weirdo. Finally, I let him go. I wish the circumstances were better, but I'm glad we finally introduced ourselves properly. His smile goes a touch cheerier. Then he points over his shoulder at his house. Hey, I can't leave my kid. You want to come over for some cocoa? I blink at him, the homey offer sounding strange coming out of a gigantic tough guy like him. He seems to know it and chuckles sheepishly, shoving his hands in his pockets. Can't break out the booze until after my kid's in bed. It's a rule. Oh, that's all right. I could really use some chocolate right now, actually. I step out onto the porch, fishing in my pocket for my keys. Shayla is gone, but until the smell of her perfume dissipates from the rooms of my house, I don't want to be there. And as for Carl, he could ask me to go to the garbage dump with him, and I would probably say yes. So does she hassle you like that a lot? He asks quietly as I finish locking up and turn to follow him back to his house. Since I was 3. She has a kind of mental disorder, and she's a complete pain on top of that. He opens the gate for me. Maybe you should get a restraining order. I don't want to get in your business uninvited, but if she's been this way for almost 20 years, she's not gonna change. His garden is immaculate, populated with non-toxic trees and flowers to go with its clover and chamomile lawn. Even his yard is kid-safe. I wonder if he redid the landscaping himself. I drink in the sight and scents, letting them soothe me. I know, I reply once I've centered myself a little. It's part of why I moved out of our family home. But she doesn't seem to be satisfied with just driving me away. If she's as narcissistic as she seems, they're all like that. His tone is tired and knowing as he leads me up onto the porch. His house is twice the size of mine, the porch double deep beneath a matching wraparound balcony. Narcissists drive people away with their behavior, but then they get desperate for attention and go chasing after them. Sounds like you're speaking from experience, I comment as he unlocks his door. He nods mutely, an ironic smile ghosting across his face as he looks back over his shoulder. Maybe he's right, and I should get a protection order against Shayla. I'm tired of this. A blast of warm air hits me in the face as I step in behind him. It smells of toasted bread, mint, and faintly of damp doggy. No sooner is the door shut than 2 small figures race out of the living room, one dressed in pink, the other in gold fur. The latter, all wagging tail and flailing paws, pounces on my shoe, and I feel the last of my tension dissolve as I watch the little guy untie it with his little black-jowled mouth. Well, hi there. Daddy, you promised Coco. The tiny blonde imp clinging to Carl's leg pouts slightly and then turns to look at me. Hi, did you come to see my new puppy? Hi. I'm Emmeline. I'm your neighbor. Your dad invited me over for Coco. I reach down and scratch the puppy's ears, and he starts trying to engulf my fingertips in his mouth. That's a pretty name. I'm Jenny. My daddy's named Carl, but you can call him Daddy. Carl suddenly bursts into a coughing fit, harumphing and pressing a fist against his mouth. Okay, thanks for that. I smile awkwardly, wondering what Carl finds so funny and why he's hiding his laughter.
End of sneak peek. Thank you for listening to this sneak peek of The Dom Next Door. Thank you for listening to this audiobook. Please like and subscribe to support this channel. It helps more than you know.